today, I'm joined by someone whose work has shaped the field of executive coaching worldwide. She's a pioneer who blends psychology, communication, and data-driven insights. Barbara, again, welcome to Reimagining You.
There is more science behind leadership than we ever give credit. We were studying things like agility and adaptability and wide range of influence, but we missed the most basic fundamental predictor of executive success, but also, I think, human happiness. And that is your personal self-awareness. And it has become the super predictor. And in every study that we do, when we look at our data of high potential executives, there are a few markers that tell us whether or not somebody's going to be successful.
Welcome to Reimagining You, the podcast where leaders, builders, and creators reflect on what happens when the title fades and what really means to build a brand that leads with purpose, not just credentials. I'm your host, Dr. Ali Daher, and today I'm joined by someone whose work has shaped the field of executive coaching worldwide. She's a pioneer who blends psychology, communication, and data-driven insights. Yes, you heard it, data-driven insights, as she has studied more than 600,000 leaders, advised Fortune 500 executives, written influence books, and even shares the distinction with Dr. Marshall Goldsmith as the inaugural recipient of the Global Executive Coaching Thought Leadership of Distinction Award. I don't know if I said it right, but we'll...
It sounds really impressive. Ellie, thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure to have a chance to be with you and to share insights together. Thank you.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I know you're a founder, president, and CEO of Executive Core, leading a team of about 100 global professionals, if not more, committed to transforming leadership development. Barbara, again, welcome to Reimagining You.
Thank you, Ellie.
Before we start, I gave a clue to our audience and viewers about the 600,000 leaders. Barbara, you've done really something very few people on this planet can say they've done. You've studied them, and across the world. That's an astonishing sample size. Most of us are even lucky if we can draw lessons from a handful of bosses or mentors in our careers. But you've had the privilege of seeing patterns across more than 500,000. So let's start here. When you look at all the data, what did you discover and what really predicts executive success?
Well, I will admit it. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to studying psychometrics and patterns. And, there is more science behind leadership than we ever give credit. And one of the super predictors, I'm a former SVP of talent management at Korn Ferry. And I was studying databases before I left to start my own firm. And I realized we made a really egregious error. And that is, we were studying things like agility and adaptability and wide range of influence, but we missed the most basic fundamental predictor of executive success, but also, I think, human happiness. And that is your personal self-awareness. And it was so obvious. It was something we looked at, but we never called out. We never named. And it has become the super predictor. And in every study that we do, when we look at our data of high potential executives, there are a few markers that tell us whether or not somebody's going to be successful. The very first one is self-awareness. The second one is going to be how well a leader creates a zone of psychological safety. And that means that they create a climate where people can show up and do their best. The third is accountability and making sure that they are clear about what the goals are. And then you get into adaptability and your ability to use a wide
Hmm.
range of influence and communication.
Nice. So, do you think these are the five traits? I think there are five. You just mentioned them. Are they um, traits that we could probably use to have leaders become future ready for 2030?
Absolutely. I had the pleasure of working internationally with Egon Zehnder first, and then I worked with the partners internationally at Heidrick and Struggles, and then, of course, later at Korn Ferry. And we were always interested when you were looking for candidates for C-suite jobs about what would make someone successful. And we would use batteries of different assessments when I was working in partnership at Heidrick and Struggles. And so there are some predictive variables that allow us to select somebody that's going to be great in a senior role. I think for the listeners today, it's probably more relevant to get personal and to take a
Mm.
really quick look in the mirror. I don't know if you recall, Ellie, but early in my career, I've been doing this 30 years, but early in my career, when I was a partner owner in my last firm, the very first firm that I started doing this kind of work in, I tragically lost my husband. And I think a lot of people who are out there listening, they're searching not only for enrichment in their work, but they also want how they work to bleed over into their personal lives in a way that sustains them, sustains their families, sustains their loved ones. And that completely revolutionized how I looked at executive success. I think you have to look at the whole package of the human being. And for anybody who's listening, I would encourage you, you are more influential than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
And there are
Yes.
key decisions that you can make. And everything that we talk about can be learned.
Wow, wonderful. And thank you for sharing such a private moment with the audience and the viewers. Appreciate that. Uh, but I want to bring you back to my introduction. And I had another clue there, which is the
You have to
moment
bring
in
me
your
back because
to,
I'm gonna go off on a tangent. Of course you are.
So we're going to introduce that discussion or the moment in your career that puts you back in a very rare company. Back in 2013, when you were honored with the inaugural Global Executive Coaching Thought Leader of Distinction Award. I think I pronounced it right this time. And the only other person to ever share that recognition with you was Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, arguably the most famous executive coach in the world. I feel like it's really like winning an Oscar alongside Meryl Streep or something, So, so take me back to that moment. What did that recognition mean for you, and how did it shape the way you think about your role in the coaching profession?
Well, obviously, I was incredibly honored, and I'll tell you some fun stories about that.
Right.
Um, but I was looking for a community of executive coaches that were really working at the top of the house. And I really enjoyed being involved with the International Coaching Federation in the very beginning, but I was having trouble finding my family. And those were people who were business coaches who were concerned about organizations, both financial success and accelerating their leaders. And those people who could walk into a boardroom or who could walk into the C suite. What was so wonderful about being honored as a thought leader of distinction was that it was also an honor bestowed upon me by what I kind of consider my family now, and that's the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches. And I think
ACEC. Yes.
ACEC, I think Marshall felt a little bit the same way. I have a funny story and I don't tell it very often. So I'll tell you a secret. So one of a lot of my colleagues who work with me, one of our largest clients over the years was McKinsey and Company. And there's a group of us that designed, um, it was a week long, originally it was a 2 week long boot camp for McKinsey. I remember one of the very first times I was put on, it was a version of that program. We were a very small firm in Colorado at that time. It was my firm that was acquired by Korn Ferry. And working with McKinsey all over the world, you just had to be on your game. And the funny
Uh-huh.
thing about Marshall, there were two firms that were selected to work with McKinsey at the time. One was my prior firm, and one was Marshall Goldsmith's firm. And one of my very first experiences, here I was 20 something, working with Ivy League graduates from all over the world. And here I am in the same room with Marshall Goldsmith.
Hmm.
My firm went on to work for McKinsey, and in fact, many of my colleagues that serve executive core continue to work with McKinsey. I don't think Marshall's working with them anymore, but I thought that was funny. When I got that award, that was sort of how my career all started. And I always laugh. He always remembers to send me a Christmas card, but I'm not sure he remembers my name. He's so famous. But at that time, our work with McKinsey, our work with Egon Zehnder, the dot-com bubble was happening. We were doing a lot of assessment work. And as you know, as you've already pointed out, I have a passion for evidence-based feedback. And when you get 360 feedback, having an individual partner to help you make sense of that feedback against your career goals and where you want to go, is a luxury. And I was getting the opportunity to do it a lot. When Marshall and I first started out, different firms, but we weren't even smart enough to call it executive coaching. Did you know that? We all used to call it
No.
one-on-ones.
Ah,
And I
okay.
remember going back to my CEO at the time and saying, this must be a standalone P&L for our firm. This is the most transformative thing that we do. And I remember my CEO at the time saying, nope, we just lose money doing it. We do it because it's the right thing to do, but we're never going to make any money. Although my suspicion was he knew if he told me no, I wouldn't drop it, because that was one of the best ways to motivate me. And so we started staffing international engagements for executive coaching for CEOs, high potentials all over the world, with firms like Cisco and Hewlett Packard. And obviously we were doing that kind of work with McKinsey at the time. But what was unique about what we were doing is that we were doing it on an international scale with executive coaches that had a shared methodology. And one of my honors and privileges was leading that and designing the coaching methodology along with their CEO at the time. And I did all the
Hmm.
certifications, with the exception of some in Asia. I partnered with a good friend and colleague, Eileen Brower, for those, just because I was doing so much international travel at the time. But then I got to know this huge cadre of C-suite executive coaches. And I think what I'm most proud of is we got people unstuck. And when you started this podcast, you said, many of the listeners may be at a crossroads in their career.
Yes.
They may
Mm.
be feeling like, okay, they're successful, but they're not doing what they're passionate about. And I think from the very beginning of our career, helping people discover, first of all, that they were stuck. And then secondly, being an honored thought partner as they decided where to turn on their next crossroad. And I'm really proud to say I've started working with many people at the director level earlier in my career, or at the associate or partner level, who are now CEOs of publicly traded organizations. And they've enjoyed their work. I think that's the
Hmm.
most fulfilling part for me.
Brilliant. Thank you. I want to bring on the same point that you talked about, which is the mission, right? Because in my book, Reimagining You, I developed a 10-step process to take you from a zero to a hero, from taking you from the invisible to make you remarkable. And the first chapter is about your mission. Now, which you touched a little bit on that, and we're going to drill a bit more on that. But I'm going to share a secret that I've done a research that are based on the papers you shared with me. So it was fascinating just reading your 4 papers because this, and I hope this podcast plus these papers is a master class on its own. And I will list all these papers and I'll put them for the audience and viewers to read because they are remarkable papers. One of them is Above the Board. The second one is about executive presence, which we're going to talk quite a bit on that. The third one is Integral Leadership, which I drew some of the questions, most of the questions are actually from that paper. And the last one is Pathways to Inclusion. So I'm going to take the Integral Leadership and talk about the mission, because in that paper, you have put in a framework that emphasizes balancing short-term performance with long-term transformation. So for our leaders that are listening or viewing, who feel their career success no longer aligns with who they are, what is the best way to uncover whether their mission still reflects their authentic self, and how can they realign it?
I was you had told me that you were going to ask me some questions about this. So I was thinking about it. And for the people who are either listening or watching, I wanted to say one thing, and that is, how are you making meaning today compared to how you make meaning in the past? So how are you making meaning today compared to how you have in the past? And you just take a moment to reflect about that. And here is when you know you're at a crossroads. And I love what you wrote in your book about from zero to hero, because I was just sitting here when you were telling me the papers that I had written that you'd read. I was listening for a second. I'm like, who is that? You know, we do from zero to hero. We all have a little bit of imposter syndrome. But I was just kind of laughing about that. But when you realize that you're making meaning today differently than how you've made it in the past, what that really signals is you're beginning to question some of life's assumptions. And I used to tell my students at Notre Dame, I taught there for 10 years, that you have graduated beyond so many of your past assumptions. For those of us that are on the path for more integral leadership, for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, it's a more holistic, systematic way of seeing how things are interrelated. And you begin to see more complexity in the world and begin to see how things are interdependent. But when you realize that assumptions that you were operating from in the past no longer serve you, it's time to rethink where you're leading people. I had a couple of examples, Ellie, that I prepared. Now, one was my favorite that I used to work into a class. It was the very first class when you were doing your executive MBA at Notre Dame. I had the honor of being the first professor that students had to get through when they were doing their executive MBA. And I was the last professor before they graduated.
I'm not sure if they're lucky or unlucky. So
I hope they
we have
felt
to
they
ask
were lucky.
them.
But there was a story that we always told about, at least in North America, kind of a famous CEO. And his name was Ray Anderson. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ray Anderson. Ray Anderson went to Europe and saw that some carpet making companies were making carpet tiles instead of making these huge spools of carpet for commercial application. And he just thought that was really kind of smart. So we brought the concept back to North America, and this was in the 70s. And our carpet making industry has been one of the biggest offenders of pollution, particularly in our southern mills. And Ray Anderson came back with this idea, and he started manufacturing carpet tiles and started his own company. But somewhere along the way, his customers started asking him what he was doing for the environment. And he didn't have any really good answers. And he discovered a number of environmentalists that really influenced him. And he said it was like a spear to the chest. He fundamentally changed his assumption. He'd always been worried about supply chain and making sure that he had enough stuff to make carpet, but he didn't really think about the legacy that he was leaving his grandchildren. So he radically changed how he communicated about the industry, and his company, Interstate Carpet, has become one of the environmental leaders across all industries.
Nice.
They recycle tiles. They even take carbon out of the atmosphere with some of their manufacturing techniques. So they're working not only to be zero carbon footprint, but negative
Negative
carbon
carbon.
footprint. And he's
Nice.
passed, but his company is still on fire. So I would say to people who are listening, when you're starting to challenge your assumptions, and even if you're getting a lot of resistance, you're probably onto something big. And it's probably time for you to reframe where you're leading people. I could give you several other examples if that's interesting, but probably not. I don't know.
No, beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you. I guess, they've got few ideas here and how to really reflect on how they will find their mission. Because that's where it all starts. Look in the mirror, reflect, think, listen, and then start crafting your own mission. How are you going to be, what's you in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, what you're going to be doing, what people will talk about you, what people will say about you, and what you would want to be happy, right?
Yeah,
So,
I can give you another really great example of that, Ellie. I had a student, his name was Michael Carroll, and he had a very, very passionate way. He was a Texan. He wore cowboy boots and wore a 10-gallon hat to class every single day. And he'd been through a lot in his life. He'd just broken off a relationship that had meant a lot to him. He was in commercial real estate, but he started challenging his assumptions, and it was kind of an irreverent, in his own Texas way. Is I won't swear on your podcast, but he had a mantra for the class and for me. He said, "Show the blank up, and you can fill in with whatever expletive you want." Michael didn't pull any punches, but he challenged everybody around him with everything that you do. Just show the blank up. We all fell in love with him. He produced two pretty successful movies on Netflix as a hobby. Very successful commercial real estate person, went through the class and passed away tragically from a hemorrhage in his brain. But I can tell you, whether your life is short or your life is long, when you dive in, challenging your assumptions, and you're fully aware and present in all that you do, and very caring and empathetic, but also cognitively sharp in all that you do, you will make a difference on people's lives. In executive integral leadership, we talk, and I know you mentioned this in the paper, for everybody who's watching or listening, do a quick evaluation. Where are you cognitively? Are you in the game in terms of facts and figures and data and evidence? Are you fully present emotionally? Are you understanding the other person? Are you constantly challenging your assumptions to be more ethical and more moral? Are you constantly challenging how you can interact with people on a deeper interpersonal exchange? And then finally, whatever your beliefs are, and I think I've traveled the world enough to be pretty eclectic. I think there are virtues that every major religion shares, whatever your spirituality is. But your relationship with something bigger than yourself, how are you tapping into that?
Nice. A moment of reflection here. I'm going to bring it one level to the next chapter, which is uniqueness. So just before the podcast, I was coaching a gentleman about his personal branding, and he was raving about him writing a book. He wrote a book about recruiting, and not any recruiting. He's 30 years of experience in the HR recruiting. He has a certain method. He has certain things that, and then he was so happy to reach out to this university, some of the executive search firms. And so I've asked him a couple questions. What is it for? What are you trying to achieve with the book? Is it sales, or is it the book, or is it you? And he started getting lost. Then, okay, well, yeah, the revenue of the book is not going to be that much. And told him, okay, I know it's not going to make you rich because you consult and you make a lot more money in one day than what you're going to sell in the book. So what is it about? Then we went through all this, and then he says, okay, well, it's about me. Maybe I'm thinking, maybe I want to do this for the future and consult and claim that domain. Aha. So that's you. That's probably, then you need to work on your mission. Very good. But what's my next question to you? So what? He said, what makes you unique? What makes you credible and unique? You told me about all this. You've lived 30 years. I lived 40 years. You worked in HR. I worked in HR. I've seen 12 countries. You've seen 5 countries. What makes you unique? What makes you credible that people would listen to you? What's your uniqueness? And then we went through the call, and I told him, you know what? You have everything, but what you lack is one thing. It's confidence. You have all the ingredients. You just have to have the confidence to embark on that journey. So I'm going to go to your executive presence paper. You wrote about the language of influence. And it's from inspiring to consulting to asserting. Right? And that's what the journey is. For someone trying to build a personal brand that stands out and be unique, how can they discover their unique influence style? And in your own journey, what edge has made you unforgettable in the C-suite?
I think being unforgettable in the C-suite is not just knowing what makes you unique. And I love how you phrased that story with your client, but it is really just so carefully understanding your client and what their leadership brand is. One thing, and you mentioned, we've been measuring people's influence styles. I've been doing that for 30 years. And most of us have a repertoire of about 4 influence styles that we use all the time. And you said, there is this journey from being assertive, maybe consulting and co-building ideas with other people. But when you migrate and you really master inspiring, you can lead large groups of people. You can leave people better than you found them. I think that's very true. And we sometimes call it a power pack. But if you can assert, if you can rationally persuade, if you can consult, and if you can inspire, those are kind of minimum standards for any listener or watcher today in terms of being really influential. But I would also hazard that there's one that we're missing. And I just took a snapshot of our international database in the last couple of weeks. And I've been talking about this because it troubles me. I will tell you, our lowest influence language in our database is coalition building. And sometimes I say coalition building is another word for leadership. It's getting
Hmm.
a large group of people all moving together in a common direction for a common goal. And when I work with some of the most amazing leaders, I know you do too, Ellie, and I love what you said about your story of just not having confidence. I worry that we may be at a time in history where some of our leaders have lost the confidence to lead large groups of people to a better future. And when their stakeholders are rating their ability to build a coalition as a lowest skill, I think there's work to be done there. And I think it also relates to that power pack and inspiring people to go after goals that are bigger than they currently see.
Yeah, it takes really courage and be confident about your unique value proposition. Um, the way I can share how I started by looking at my UVP, and I suggest this normally on podcasts to audience and viewers. I say, well, it's easy. Let's do a test. Let's go to 7 or 10 of the people I know. They work with me or they know me from past or but on a professional capacity. And ask them one question. I like this cup, by the way. We're going to ask you about it. Uh,
It, it
so
it's
I,
my inspiring cup. It's Star Trek, because Star Trek
okay,
always reminds me to find a better vision of what the future can be.
but there is magical thing in it. Can you explain the magic behind that cup?
Yeah, well, you can tell my coffee's getting um cold. My children gave me this cup. And
Okay.
when you put hot coffee in it, you've got the Star Trek original characters on a planet. And when it's hot, they transport. Actually, they transport from the transporter all the way to the planet. But as my coffee gets colder, you see that they go back to the ship and the transporter. So anyway,
Ah,
that's my crazy cup.
that's cool. That's
But
cool.
there is a
Very good.
reason I use it, and it relates to what you were talking about.
Yes. Yes. So I was saying that I did a simple test. I asked 7 or 10 of my friends, professional people that I work with. I told them without even thinking, within 30 seconds, tell me the top 3 things or adjectives you describe me with.
Oh, I love that.
And
Do I get to do it?
yes, yes, of course.
Uh,
In private, maybe. Oh, no.
no,
Go ahead.
I want to do it publicly. First
All
of
right, go
all,
ahead.
intellect. Secondly, kindness. And thirdly, I'd say strategic. You have, and I've watched you. I've been watching you in meetings. You didn't realize this, but you have this ability. You know, people are so distracted. There's a Cornell study that was done years ago where they studied managers, and 87% of the time they were distracted from priorities. One of your superpowers, Ellie, is that you'll get a bunch of people who are distracted by a lot of different things, and you get them all moving in a productive direction. And you're leading the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches right now. And I've wanted to give you like a virtual high five or a hug, because I've noticed how you're getting so many different thinkers moving in a really common direction. There you go. I did it.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. That's very kind of you, and I'm humbly uh, thanking you for that. Um, so, in fact, actually, what you have said is probably one or two are common to about 7 out of 10 that have described me. So here I look, okay, well, this is how I've been seen from the outside. So it means that I'm unique in this, right? Because that's how people see me. And then the the other revelation is that some people have seen distinct things, different than each other, because it relates to how I engage with them, maybe in the capacity, maybe in the level of tolerance, maybe in the attitude. So that opened my mind to think really about myself and about my uniqueness. And based on that, I built on that. Then I moved forward into my personal branding journey.
Hmm.
So for the audience and viewers, this is a quick exercise to do. Try it and see what you get out of it. It's probably fascinating.
Well, and I would also encourage people who are listening to use a validated 360 to really
Mm,
see how people see your strengths. And I think most of us, we do a 360. We go to the thing that lists our bottom 10 or our bottom 3 or all the criticisms of what we could do better. But I tell the executives that I work with, they invariably take at least one 360 with me, is to take that page that highlights their brand, their strengths that others see. I always tease them. I'm like, if you have children or children, when they
mm,
do something really great in school, you put it on the refrigerator with a magnet, or you hang it up on a cork board or whatever you may have in your home. And so I tell very senior executives to rip that page out or print it and put it on their refrigerator, because it is a reminder that that is their brand. That's what people really appreciate about them. We use a 360 really frequently called the PSLOI, and it measures lots of different things. But one of the things that I love is it does give you your top 10 highest rated skills from your stakeholders. And it
mm.
is so easy to just rip out and put on your refrigerator. And that reminds you what makes you unique in the minds of other people.
Yes. And of course, what comes with uniqueness is also now the technical aspect or the subject matter expertise, which is your credibility.
Mm.
So you have your uniqueness, but you also have to claim credibility. So I had in my podcast now, this is the 28th episode, but I had startups, I had young generation. I had my son who was 24, who's venturing into his own business, which is difficult to claim credibility at a 24-year-old, right? Fresh from university, 2 years of BCG under his belt, and yet he's in the business and he's trying to convince investors, right? And I had a 39-year-old that is now venturing into the business, but he's swimming, he's really floating outside the swimming pool. And I make the analogy of the swimming pool is that when you want to venture in your own business or creation or whatever, you can either stay in your lane, means if you're an automotive specialist, you stay in the automotive industry, or you can stay in the pool, which is in mobility, or you can be outside the pool. You can go open a restaurant or a music place or whatever that you want to do as ambition and mission, right? So, but the question is, what makes you credible and gives you the authority to talk to me or to give me that book or to address me or to advise me, right? And I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that. They have a mission, they're afraid, and that's probably what the guy or the person that I was coaching had the lack of confidence because he doesn't feel he has authority to go in the wild open and claim that authority. He just needs that push. He needs to build that confidence. So talking about this, I mean, of course, Barbara, you've established your credibility way back. But what advice do we give to people? How do they assert their credibility or develop it or, um, you know, they have to claim that thought leadership somehow.
I think one of the number one mistakes many of us make is if you've truly put in your 10,000 hours around a particular subject matter area or 10,000 hours in your area of expertise, chances are you've learned a lot through successes and failures. I had the chance to visit the Culinary Institute of America with my brother this
Okay.
earlier in the summer, and I was really struck. I think we all should be a chef. So chefs do two things. First, they master technique. And so in order to be credible, you need to know your stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is that rational persuading, which is the brand of most senior executives. You really have to have good facts, figures, data. You have to have a cognitive handle on your subject. And so sometimes you see people who are great at bravado, but they lack substance. So master your craft as if you're a chef, your techniques. But a chef isn't a chef until you own your own flavor. So each chef
Mm-hmm.
has a signature flavor,
Signature.
and you seek it out because it is so special, it is so unique. So master your craft and the basic techniques, but then celebrate your flavor because it's unique and it's different. Um, my brother and I, we ate. They have a place where the public can come in the Culinary Institute of America, and we laughed because we'd had a lot of it. We were bringing a boat up the Atlantic together, and it was fun time with my brother. We'd eaten at some really expensive and beautiful restaurants. And here we are in kind of a cafeteria setting. And it was the flavors and it was the spices and the herbs. Um, I had the very best pastry that I had eaten. And I love eating pastry in Paris or Italy. Um, this was remarkable, but it had a unique flavor. So, whatever it is, master your craft, but then celebrate your flavor.
I love that analogy. This is perfectly said and described the mission and uniqueness. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to ask you one more question, then we're going to go to the $1 million question to end the episode. So, this question is about visibility. Now, a lot of the professionals in my circle, they have an issue to be visible. And it's fear of visibility being like self-promotion, or maybe what does the company think about me going there and, bragging about things and my knowledge. I mean, for me, I always tell them, well, the knowledge that you accumulated over the years is your knowledge. It's not company knowledge. You're free to do anything you want with it within your contractual agreement. But if you want to talk about it, if you want to impact the world around you, if you want to make good to people or to companies, you can, as long as it doesn't interfere with your contractual engagement with your company that you are basically working for. So, how can you think they can show up in a way that grows their trust and reinforce their personal brand without undermining authenticity and their, company limits?
As you were talking about that, one of my greatest coaches in life, the other secret that people don't tell you is that when you're a coach, it's probably because you've had dozens of amazing coaches in your life. One of my greatest coaches in life, I remember she told me, call all of your success back to you before you walk into a room. It starts with your mindset, and you have to own all of the success and what you've learned and all the mistakes that you've made that you don't want to repeat again, but celebrate it and own it and call it back to you before you walk into the room. And then the other thing is you can tell the people that you're meeting with that you've been deeply thinking about some of the challenges that they're facing, and you've been giving it some thought with some of your own experiences. But before you jump in and tell them everything that you've thought about, you want to know what their most vexing pain points are. And then you'll co-build. And what have they tried? What's working? What's not working? And this is one of the power of the influence language consulting. Then you're challenged to bring in at least 3 things that they hadn't thought of that would be highly advantageous for them. And you co-build something, and it's almost like if you come in and give all your ideas and don't listen to anything that they say, you damage the relationship. If you come into the room and listen to everything that they want and you just deliver it to them, you damage the relationship because you hurt your credibility. You can deliver and execute, but you don't bring anything fresh to the table. So a marriage of ideas is where you bring in new and different things, they bring in new and different things, and you come up with something even better together because of the human dialogue that you had. But I do think it does start with reminding yourself to call your past successes to you. You have access to tremendous information. If you become nervous or afraid, or you forget to do that, you forget to celebrate your unique flavor as a chef, as a leader, then you're not adding as much value as you possibly could.
I totally agree with you. I always advise my coachees, bring in from the past. I mean, if you think about it, if you had 30 years of career, you're actually the advisor and the consultant in the company, because you're taking knowledge, you're developing and you're sharing knowledge. So you're actually practicing all this thought leadership within your company. And if you go back in time, and I was doing during my book launch, I did spot interviews with some of the people. And one of the guests that came in for the book launch, we were talking about personal branding. What does personal branding mean to you? That was the question. And he said, listening to your talk reminds me that, hey, I didn't bring any of the successes. I was part of the Facebook initial launch. I was part of that, and I was part of that. And the guy has a Rolodex of achievements and successes, yet nobody knows about those, right? And just reflecting on your past successes, bring them back, and you'll find, you can fill a dictionary with that. And that's the start of your personal brand journey. If you just share those out, you start creating your personal brand, you start creating your flavors, and then you build this confidence, your visibility, but also maybe possibly making impact to the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As you were
Yeah.
talking about that, I was remembering a time I was walking through Amazon's headquarters, and they have some hallways that have these beautiful gilded gold frames, but then they have the product that they launched, like Alexa or the Echo, but they have people who worked on that project sign their names. We don't sign our names to the things that we worked on. And
Hmm.
if you do, you claim your brand. That's beautiful. I love
Yes.
what you said.
Yes. Last week, I aired on Thursday an episode with Bertrand Neveu. He's a young geek. Now he's into the um, startup fintech, not fintech, but investor fund. He was behind the Vision Pro, the 3D immersive reality of Apple. And he shared a moment when he was working on it. It took the team several years. He shared the moment where he actually cried. He went to the Apple store, picked up the Vision Pro in his hand, and wore it. And that was a moment of truth for him. He saw the culmination of
I gotta
his.
get rid of
Now
these
he's
and get that. And
Yeah.
give me his contact information.
Yeah, he's in Montreal. Watch him on the episode. It's pretty good. Bertrand Neveu. Last Thursday was aired.
That is so
But
cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a
Talk
lot
about
of
adding that
achievement.
to your brand.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
mean, you are, I mean, he's changing the way that people work, live, and play.
Yes,
That impacts thousands, millions of people.
millions of lives, education, you name it.
Mm.
Everything changes. Okay, so I'm gonna look in the horizon now. 10 years from now, if we're looking out 10 years out, um, I could talk about leadership and branding will evolve together. Where do you see your next horizon? But I'm going to twist that question a little bit and say, what would be your LinkedIn profile read? What would it read 10 years from now?
Oh my goodness. You know, it's funny. You had mentioned that you might ask me this question. So I decided I was going to ask artificial intelligence what the answer was. So a lot of people would say we'll be doing work in partnership with artificial intelligence. But I think what every prediction says, and of course, when you think of great technology leaders, one of their greatest hopes for the future is technology, but one of their greatest fears for the future is technology as well. And we go back to my Star Trek
Yeah.
plug. If you watch an
Right.
episode, technology is either helping you or hurting you. Um, I do think we'll be partners in technology so that we can hopefully be wiser and smarter and kinder and more humane. Um, I think we'll be celebrated for being present as human beings first and deepening and enriching the lives of people. I don't think it will take away our competitive spirit or our ability to do things that haven't been done before, or it won't take away our ability to want to differentiate our companies, our organizations, to fill needs, blue ocean strategy to find things that haven't been done before. I think we are, by our very nature, explorers. And so I think we'll find better ways to do that. Um, but if you're interested, I'll tell you what artificial intelligence told us.
Okay.
Number one, authenticity. And here's really fun. This validates your book, Reimagining You, Ellie. Authenticity is the core of leadership and branding. Now,
Okay.
I didn't give it a lot of prompts. I just put in your question that you asked me, and that was the number
Hmm.
one thing that came up. That's why I think you're onto something. Okay, number two, which relates
Okay.
to something I'm passionate about, is integral thinking and systems leadership. Now, I didn't
Hmm.
feed it any of my papers. I didn't feed it any expertise, but that was the number two thing that artificial intelligence came up with. And then number three, and I think at least in the United States, we're afraid to talk about this, but inclusion and belonging is non-negotiables. We
Mm.
have to use
Mm.
everybody on the planet to get better, not just some. And we have to be able to invest in humanity. We have to be humans first.
Yes, that's key. The human advantage.
Number four,
Uh,
by the way, which
mm.
supports the person you had on your podcast who created that incredible Apple product, is we're also going to be tech savvy. We're going to be a tech savvy humanity. And I think that means we'll be able to use facts better. I think we're in a phase where we're having trouble separating fact from fiction, and there can be a lot of misinformation out there. I think at some point we'll rise above that and we'll get better, become better human scientists.
Well said. Chat is right, looks like.
Well,
For once.
I partnered. It's wrong a whole lot of times, and
Yes,
um,
yes.
that's why I think
But they make
we have to
sense.
partner with it.
Yes, it makes sense, really. Barbara, what an inspiring conversation.
Ellie, every time I'm with you, you inspire me. You're an amazing, talk about amazing humans on the planet. And we need more of them. Everybody who's listening or watching, um, there is so much blue ocean strategy for people to make a positive difference, to leave people and places
Absolutely.
better than they found them. And you are indeed one of those humans. So thanks for inviting me to do this.
Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your words. But truly, you're giving us a masterclass in rethinking leadership, from how we anchor our mission to how we actually cultivate our presence and expand our influence, and ultimately leaving a legacy that lasts. So, what I admire most from the papers and from your work is how you can turn complex frameworks, the executive presence, integral leadership. You have even a paper which we didn't talk about too much. It says the board governance, and the other one is about inclusion, into practical guidance. Leaders can act on it right now. So you don't just teach leaders how to succeed, but you show them how to matter. So for our listeners and viewers, if you take one thing from today, let it be this: your personal brand isn't built by what you say about yourself. It's built by the presence you carry, the stories you live, and the influence you leave in others' lives. Barbara, thank you for reminding us that leadership is not a role, it's a ripple. And
Hmm.
that and those ripples you've created will continue to shape leaders, organizations, and futures for years to come. Thank you again, and watch us on the next episode every Thursday, 5 p.m. Dubai time. Barbara, thank you and goodbye.
Ellie, thank you.